Hey everyone, and welcome to Sasquatch Theory. In this video, I interview a guest that told a Dogman encounter that was extremely disturbing, and I've never heard a cryptid encounter quite like this. I strongly advise people not to let their children listen to this because it will give them nightmares, so you have been warned, and all my videos are set for crowds 18 and older. This sighting traumatized the witness so bad that he sought help from a priest in hopes of cleansing his soul and mind of the encounter. The encounter took place at an old steel mill in Youngstown, Ohio, when Matt and his friends were around 14 years old. I believe there was divine intervention involved with this encounter, and the witness is truly lucky to be alive. One of the witnesses was traumatized by the encounter so much that he is not here today to tell us the story. Please give your respect to the caller and also your prayers. Matt, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Miguel. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to have you on. Matt, if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself and your encounter that you had in Ohio, I believe it is.
When I was younger, I was about 13, 14 years old. We're talking about the year of either 1989, 1990. Right there in that time frame, I had an experience, and I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio. I still live in the area. I live in a suburb of Youngstown, Ohio. When this happened when I was younger, it not only happened to me, it happened to three other of my very good friends. Two of them are not here, unfortunately. They passed away, but we used to do what 14-year-olds do when we had just gotten out of school for the summer. The following year we were all going to be in high school, and we were very rambunctious, and we went everywhere on our bikes. We didn't have cell phones and the stuff that kids have today. We went outside and we went all over different towns and suburbs around us. We'd ride far, and one of the places that we frequented was in Youngstown, Ohio, in the downtown area. If you Google it, and you will see, or if you Google Youngstown, Ohio steel mills, old steel mills, you'll see there are just huge portions of where the steel mill industry was when, I believe, back in the 20s through the 40s. I forget when the steel mill industry fell out around, America and different areas, but Youngstown was known for being one of the biggest steel makers in the country during that time. And when the steel mill industry unfortunately fell out, right around the time there was all kinds of problems in the United States with finances, and it unfortunately affected the city because when the steel mill closed, tons of people lost jobs and caused all kinds of issues. There is a working steel mill, actually. If you look at like an aerial view on Google of what the steel mills look like, the old ones, you'll see from an aerial point of view to the right of it, there's a new big, huge steel mill company that's running and working and utilize like the railroad tracks and stuff to make it. But where the old one is, it's just a gigantic, huge amount of space that goes on for I don't even know how many miles, but it's just monstrous, and it's just old, rusting away steel mills, just like all over the country. There's many, cities all over that unfortunately that happen too. And it's just a big dilapidated um, mass amount of old buildings and some material and things like that. And we liked going down there. And when we would go down there, and we would always, I have to plug this in, we would always bring protection of some kind in, usually guns. And yeah, we were young to have it, but this was also during, the time of when there was a lot of gang things going on across the country, like the Bloods and the Crips. And yes, it made its way from California all the way over to Youngstown, Ohio. In fact, Youngstown, Ohio, numerous times, unfortunately, gained a title. It was number one like 4 or 5 times as the city in America that had the most murders per capita. It was called Murder Town, USA for a while. And so that's why we would bring guns with us. Like my one buddy had a little 22 and another had a little automatic 25, which funnily made its way through all of our hands. A sorry little thing where you'd fire it a couple times, the pin would fall out of it, you'd have to put it back in. I had a 38, which I would borrow from my dad's closet when he was at work, and he would have not been happy if he knew that I took that. I was 14 years old, and he thought he was slick hiding it in an old cowboy boot in his closet. And he never even wore cowboy boots. So it was like, hey, what are those? That draws my attention. And there's the gun in there. And we never shot at anybody or anything, but, we bring it down not only because, we could run into trouble from gang problems, which was really bad. There would be homeless people sometimes that would cause problems. Youngstown was also known for their mob connections, huge mob connections, which you can Google too. And sometimes they or some of the gangs would go down to the steel mill area and they would, drop a dead body down there, or they would, take people down there and do nefarious things to them. And, we didn't want to run into somebody doing that, or somebody that could be willing to do that and us not to have protection. But the number one reason that we brought it down there was because they had packs of wild dogs. And, they have them in many big cities across the country. Like I remember seeing a documentary on Detroit, going to where they are now, where the city is just falling apart and there's a lot of crime and everything. Well, one of the things they have there is they have wild dogs there. And basically, what it is you have dogs that either ran away from home or were let go or were abused by their owners and they ran away or broke off their chains or whatnot. And there's usually, 6 or 7 of them, and they kind of help each other survive, and they run around, and they are not your Fido, here, come here, let me pet you kind of dog. They are the kinds that will attack somebody, and they have killed people. And, I will actually bring that subject up at the end of the story because it has a connection to everything. So there's actually during this summer and the summer after it, there were some homeless people who passed, and from what we had been told on, and I believe it was on the news and whatnot, that they were killed by some of these packs of wild dogs. And we knew one of my best friends, well, he was my best friend. I'm not going to say exactly what his dad did for the city, but he had a very high position. And, I'm sure most could figure out what he was doing. He was in charge of basically everything. And, my buddy's not here to say, yeah, Matt, it's okay that you tell everybody what he did. But he had a high position, and he told us about when, I specifically remember when one homeless person was attacked and killed by these packs of dogs. So we would bring them down there so that if, God forbid, these things came and started attacking us or one of us, we could protect ourselves. So we go down there and we just investigate down there, check out all the different buildings and things that they had down there. It was very dangerous looking back as a adult, because they were, like I said, very dilapidated and falling apart. And there was some of them that we couldn't even really go in very far because like floors were gone, and you could tell that, like, if you just screamed in about some of these buildings. I remember we did that, and the echo from it like brought pieces of ceiling down into it. So okay, well, we're not going in that one. The building that we frequented the most was um, this one building that had a concrete foundation, a concrete floor. It had 4 floors, and you could stand in the middle of the first floor and you could look straight up and you could see, each floor as you look up. And these 4 floors had stairs on the outside of the room you could go up, but on these stairs there was also, again, some of that dilapidated problem going on, where some of the stairs were gone. Like, for instance, going from the first floor to the second floor, there was like 3 or 4 of the stairs that were completely gone. And all that was there was just some pieces of rebar sticking up in the sky from when that concrete still was there. So if we went up to the next floor, we would just have to hop over and go up. It was dangerous. If someone would have fell, they would have got hurt, but we never did, thankfully. And something else I'll bring up later that has meaning is they had these foundation pillars that were made of concrete, and they had 4 of them in the corner of each room, and they went up through the ceiling into the next floor, up to the fourth, so on and so forth. And they were giant. I mean, they had to be either 4 or 5 feet wide, and they were just massive. And I will bring up the importance of those as we go on later. And we found these, being a steel mill making building, we found these, and I'd love to know someday what they are. I'm going to do some research on them, but they were these metal like U-shaped pieces of steel that were like 3 feet wide and maybe 3.5 to 4 feet high, and they were real thick, and they were just curved, and like you could stand behind it, and it kind of reminded you of some of the shields that like maybe some of the gladiators used, where the shield would curve and it would protect them. They could kind of stand up inside of it, if you get my drift there. And they had hundreds of these things in this building. And what we did is, because we wanted privacy, and this was our home base, so to speak. So if we were seen in these buildings or whatever, because like I told you, there's still a working steel mill down in that area. And in the building that we were in, along with many other buildings, the railroad track for the other steel mill that was still working went right in, literally right in front of this building. And again, if anybody Googles the steel mills in Youngstown, Ohio, the old ones, and you get it, there are so many great pictures I actually found the building through a couple of the pictures that we would be in. And you can see right from the pictures of it down there how there's a railroad track that literally goes right by all of these buildings, super close. And, that's because they were able to ferry material and steel in and out and get whatever supplies they needed back in, and they'd be able to put it right in any of those buildings that they needed, or take out whatever they needed. It just made it easier. Well, the steel mill would have a train that would drive right by the one that was still running, and if they saw somebody in those buildings or walking around on there, they would call the police. I believe they also had some type of security down, on the tracks somewhere. I don't know if they were in the train itself. We never saw them. So what we did is we took a bunch of these metal things that we found, and because at each point of the room there were four sides, and each of them were open, so you could just see out and anybody could see in. So we took these and we made makeshift walls on all four sides using these metal U-shaped things, and we actually put them on top and stack them on top of each other as high as we could. And we were all pretty big guys for our age. I was the biggest, and we would just help each other get it up high. And I think we made it three high, and then however many that would go from side to side. I don't know, 15 to 20 of them. And we did them on all four sides, north, south, east, and west. And what we really like to do is stay there late or come at night, and we would have no problem finding wood and like pallets and things like that to burn. Down there was just an endless supply, and we would put everything in the middle of the room and have a huge bonfire. And because there was no ceiling, the flames would go real high, and there were four floors, so it never caused a problem. Plus, the whole building was made of concrete, so nothing ever caught on fire. We had a really good one going that night, a good fire going that night. And like I said before, there were four of us, and we started hearing the pack of wild dogs, and we kind of looked at each other, and we knew they couldn't get up into the building that we were in. Because another thing we chose this building for was because you had no stairs to get in, so we had to kind of hop up and roll ourselves up onto the outside kind of concrete, like half patio. It was almost like where you could see where there used to be stairs that you would walk up and get on this piece of concrete, turn and going through the doorway or the open wall. And there was nothing there. So that was another reason why we were happy with it, because we knew the dogs couldn't get up there, and any person who would try to get up there wouldn't, make a lot of noise, or we would hear or see them, because it wasn't super easy to get in. And we hear these dogs, and we walk outside, and we're standing on that outside kind of concrete area where, we would jump up and roll in onto to get into the building. And here comes a pack of wild dogs. And if I remember right, there were six of them. And they were on a mission, barking and sounded, very, very excited in a bad way, going to find somebody. And if you looked out right just past the railroad tracks, they had big, huge piles of material called coke. If anybody has heard of that on the steelmaking industry, it's just this material that they use. I don't know how they use it, but it just looks like almost like mounds of dirt. And they use this stuff to smelt steel. And they had huge piles of it. Just, it looked like they went a mile if you looked out either way. And we had a big pile, right, like I said, in front of our building and the building next to us. And these dogs ran just past us. They did not pay us any mind. They did not even notice us. If they did, they didn't care. And what they did is they ran up just past us, starting to go past the building on the right of us, and they went up this pile and then down the other side. And within a second or two, we hear them start to fight. And we truly believe that these dogs were fighting with each other because they went up and over, and then within a second or two, we start hearing them all attacking. So we figure, oh, they got in a fight with each other. And within, I'd say, I don't know, 5 seconds after we initially hear them start to fight, and we're trying to figure out if they're fighting each other or not, we start hearing the sound of an even louder animal. And it was fairly obvious that these dogs were fighting with something that was on the other side of this pile that we could not see. And it was, like I said, louder. It was obviously by the sound of the bass and its growl and its bark or whatever it was doing. It was just very deep and loud. And within a couple seconds after that, you could hear this pack of dogs start to yelp and whine like they're getting hurt, or whatever they're fighting with over there is starting to change the tide. And I kid you not, within a couple seconds after that, we're probably at 11 seconds total since they ran over the hill, we start seeing literally dogs in the air, not jumping or anything. They are being thrown over this mound of this coke, and some of them are hitting the ground and rolling, and some are injured, obviously injured. One started running away, it was limping real bad. Another one had a big gash on its front shoulder that went down towards its back. It was pretty bad. It was bleeding pretty bad, and we all felt bad that this thing was hurt. I don't know if later on it died or something, or it was okay. It was sad. And then within a couple seconds, two more get thrown over. And I remember the next two that came over, the one flew over and hit and rolled down the pile and took off running the way that they came, and the other ones had already started going back. And then another one hit the top of the mound, and it kind of, some of that material kind of exploded, and the dog ran and it rolled down the hill and got up, and that dog, he or she, was bleeding, got up and started limping away. And then there were two more over there, and they just came running over the hill, and they were gone. And all six of them, limping, bleeding, looked like they got run over by a car. All of them took off and went the other way that they came. And we're wondering, what just happened? What the heck was that? All of a sudden, you hear my one buddy say, "Guys, what is that? What is that over there?" And then we all look simultaneously, and what happens is we see just the most massive animal that any of us have ever seen. And I know them too, because we talked about it for years. It was just this humongous dog wolf looking animal that none of us had ever seen before in our lives. It was so big. And I've said this to everybody I've ever talked to about this. And I will always say this. It was so big, it looked fake. It just was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. What the heck is this? And it was very obviously canine. Like I said, it looked dog-like, German Shepherd, like more wolf than anything. And this animal was staring at these dogs that had taken off. And what it did next, a lot of people, I've talked to about this over the years. They kind of chuckled or laughed about this. Most didn't. I don't know. I'm sure you'll have some listeners that maybe will laugh and find it amusing. It was not in any way, shape, or form. And this dog lifts its leg and it starts doing its business. And what freaked me and my friends out the most was it wasn't that it just was doing its business. It started urinating, and the stream that came out was so powerful, and the stream was thick, like almost like a water hose. And when it hit this mound of this material that it was standing on, big chunks and pieces of the coke material to make steel started getting thrown up in the air, and it was going over to the right and to the left. It was just shooting all over, and this thing urinated for quite a long time, and it freaked me out personally because I'm looking at this animal that size is just so humongous that it looks fake at what we're looking at. But then the just overall just strength of the stream of it urinating, of how it was throwing this material, it was disturbing and it was scary because it gave you a sense of not only is this thing physically large, I mean, even it doing its business it's weirdly like super strong, and it just gave us all this impression of even it doing that is giving us the sense of this thing is dangerous, it's gigantic, and it could do damage. And all of a sudden my one friend um starts backing up, is freaked out, and trips and falls into the wall, this makeshift wall of these metal U things I was talking about before. And what happened when he hit it, it made the metal on concrete real loud scraping sound that anybody has heard in the past for when metal is scraped on concrete. These things were very heavy. I mean, they had to be at least 100 pounds, 150 pounds a piece. Took two of us to pick them up. And it had not only the size of itself, it had two more rows of it on top. So it was super loud. And when it did, it almost were like, shh. And right then, this animal snaps its head over and stops staring. It snaps its head over and it stops staring at the other dogs, and it looks right at us. And my heart sunk. I felt the blood in my face leaving. I felt really afraid. And the first thing that we all noticed when we discussed it is its eyes. Its eyes almost look like they had a battery source behind them, and they were. It was not just like, now we had talked about, could it have been eye shine, and could it have been from the fire that we had inside the building, because where it was standing at the top of this mound, you could see some of the fire light on it because it was on this big mound and it was higher up, and some of the light from the fire was coming out and it was hitting that spot. So at first we felt like, well, it must be from the fire, uh and it's causing eye shine, but it was not eye shine. It looked like it had a power source. It was so bright, and it was an amber yellowish, like orangey kind of color, and its eyes were so big that when you look at somebody in the eyes and you see their pupils, and you have multiple, I'll put it real general, you have multiple rings in your eyes when you look, and you could actually see them because we were maybe 20 feet from it, and its eyes were so bright, And you could see, because of its pupils and the other circles in its eyes, so to speak, were so large, you could tell where its eyes and its gaze were. So we knew, each one of us, each four of us, whenever it was looking at each one of us, we could tell, because, as if there was a person standing up there, no one would be able to tell which one of us it was looking at. Its eyes were even just so big, like I just said, that we knew which one of us it was looking at. And it was looking at all four of us, and it was trying to figure us out. And all of a sudden it growls, and it growls loud. And I'm going to tell you what, it growled, and we all felt it in our chests. I specifically, more than anything, after I felt it in my chest, my legs, my quads got real weak. And I always remember my quads into my calves and ankles all felt super weak. And I felt like I couldn't walk very far. I felt like I was going to go down on my knees, because I almost felt like my muscles weren't strong enough to help me stand up, or definitely not run. And two other of my buddies said that they were so sick and felt affected by this growl that they said, I feel like I'm going to throw up. My other buddy said he felt like he was going to pass out. And then my other friend didn't say anything, but you could tell he was affected. He told us later that he said the same as I did. He said, I don't know, man, but my legs started shaking, and I felt like I was in a dream, where you can't run or walk and you're in quicksand. And that's exactly how I felt. And what it did next, was something that will stick with me specifically till the day I die. It stuck with all of us, and we all said the same thing: we will never forget it, as long as we live. And what it did next was so crazy, so unnatural, so alien, so to speak, that it was just a paradigm shifted. It was just like, you've got to be kidding me. What happened was, this huge wolf-like creature stood up on two legs, and it was already super massive. It was just gigantic already. But when it stood up on two legs, and let me say something real quick, it wasn't like a dog standing up on its two hind legs waiting for like a biscuit or a treat from its owner for doing a trick or whatever. It wasn't like gangly. It wasn't, like trying to stand up and like falling forward or falling backwards, like unbalanced. This thing stood up like it does it all the time, and that it's actually more comfortable. In all of our opinions, when we talked about it, it looked more comfortable on two than four. And when it did that, we turn and we hear somebody running in. And he's, I can't take it anymore. And my one buddy, who had fallen back into that makeshift wall, turned around and ran inside. And he's screaming and running in. And we looked at each other and we followed suit. And we ran in. And we ran up to the second floor. And we, from the first to the second, there's those missing stairs. We all jumped over them and made it, thankfully. Ran up from the second floor to the third floor, and there was some of them that were missing here and there, but it was only like one here or two there. And we had no problem getting up to the third floor. Well, we didn't go up to the fourth. We stayed on the third. And something else about each floor, when you walked up the stairs and you walked towards the center of the room, which allowed you to look down or up if you were on the third floor, which we were, you could look up to the fourth floor, and you could look down to the second and the first from the middle of the room. And in the middle of the room, there was like a concrete half wall where you walked up to and you stood. You could put your arms up on it and look down, and that's what was in the middle of the room. And we ran up to the third floor, and we didn't go up to the fourth. We just stayed on the third, and we walked in front of this concrete half wall, and we were standing and staring at a position that let us see where we came in, and that if this thing was going to come in, this is where it would come in from. And what we saw and heard next made us all just sick to our stomachs and horrified, because um, what occurred right before it came in, my one buddy, like I said, was screaming and freaking out. And once we got to the third floor, he was still doing it, and he was screaming very loud. And when me and my other friend finally got up there, we went straight to him, and we started grabbing him and shaking him and telling him, listen, you have to shut up. You're going to draw this thing in here. You have to be quiet. It's outside, but if it hears you, it might come in. Shut up. And he couldn't. He was starting to just completely lose it. And, he's like, it stood up. It stood up. Well, how did it do that? What's going on? Finally, we start grabbing him to shut him up. And like I said, I'm a big guy now. I'm 6'4". I'm 265, and I was bigger. I played college ball, but I was a big kid too. And I got behind him, and I grabbed him and put my hand around his mouth, and started yelling at him in his ears. And my other buddies were grabbing him and shaking him, telling him to shut up, and he wouldn't. Finally, I didn't even realize I did it. I had grabbed him so hard, I ended up pulling him towards me. And when I looked down, his feet were dangling. So I put him back down, and he was having trouble breathing. And we all looked at him and said, we will let you go if you shut up. Are you going to shut up? And he nodded yes. So we started letting him go just to make sure, gently. And just as we're letting him go, we hear the loudest sound of like a thump, and then the sound of like dog's claws on concrete. And if you have ever had a dog or have a dog now, you hear them walk through your house and or outside, like on concrete on the patio. It's a very noticeable sound. It's very obvious they were nails. And right away, I was like, oh God, it's coming in. And I actually said that to the guys. I said, it's coming in. It Next, you hear this click, 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 and we have the fire going. And the very first thing we see after we hear the nails clicking on the concrete is the shadow of this animal. And it hits the wall, the far wall, and it was already big. But when, and even a small kid, when they stand next to a fire, their shadow that gets thrown on a wall or whatever is way bigger. So you have an animal that's very large, and then you throw the shadow on the wall from the fire, it's 10 times bigger. So that freaked us out even more. And all of a sudden, after we're staring at its shadow, it itself starts coming in. And it was back on four legs. It wasn't up on two, it was on four. And it was jet black. I'll always say this, I don't know if it was from the fire and a reflection. I tend to believe it had a whitish stripe running from the back of its neck all the way down its back onto its tail. And some of us were like, it wasn't very pronounced. We don't know if it was just from the fire, but looking back, I just think it had a white stripe going down its back that wasn't super bright or very white. It just was a little bit, of a dash of white going down. And it had a real long tail, and it did not have extremely long fur. I would say the hair on its body and on its tail was maybe an inch to an inch and a half. It actually was so almost tight looking on the creature. It almost looked like it was groomed. It was just, it wasn't, like the stories that you hear about Bigfoot having, real shaggy, dirty, messy, unkempt hair. This was real tight enough that you could see the muscles, moving in this animal when it walked. And I remember also what was going on. It was the eye shine again, be it eye shine, be it if it was something coming from internal. I'll never know. And it's looking around the room and it's sniffing. Its nose keeps snapping up in the air and it's sniffing. And it walked by the fire and I didn't see the nails, how big and how long it was, but you could hear them, like I said. Um, what happened after that was started noticing it was salivating, and that was also very scary. It was not just salivating like your pooch. It had salivating going on so much that it was like you could hear the spit coming out of its mouth and hitting the concrete on the floor. And it really, I likened it to like hearing when it's raining and you hear it, raining on a concrete floor or on your driveway or something. It was super loud, and that made it scary. And it was just so much salivation going on. It was just almost pouring out of this creature's mouth. And what scared me the most about it was, this thing salivating like this because it's looking for us and it is going to attack us and kill us and eat us. And that's the thought that was going through my head, that this thing's salivating because it thinks it's dinner time and its mouth is watering. And another thing that was going on was you could see its teeth every once in a while when it would lick some of the salivation from the corners of its mouth. You'd see its teeth, giant teeth. They would glint from the light from the fire, but it wasn't constantly like showing its teeth. It was just once in a while. And it had very perky ears that were standing straight up, reminded me similar to a German Shepherd. And its ears, it's like they were kind of cupped and going straight up like at attention, and they were moving every once in a while. You could tell it was looking to listen of where we were. And I didn't see the color of its eyes. They just looked dark to me. um, and then it went back up on two legs and it sniffed the air again, and it smelled us, obviously, because what happened after it sniffed the air again is it looked straight up at us, right at us. Its head snapped right at us as soon as it caught our scent. And I don't know, maybe the fire had covered our scent at first, but once it got to a certain point in the room, it smelled us. And when it stood up again, it's just I felt all the blood leave my face and everything. And my other buddy starts freaking out again, and he's basically checking out. This thing was so huge, and when it was down on all fours, I forgot to mention this earlier, talking about it for years, and we were discussing what to compare this creature to in size and mass and everything. And the only creature that we could all agree upon that this thing reminded us of was a bear, but not just any bear. I've seen black bear. I've seen some big ones. I haven't seen the biggest. Ohio only has some black bear here and there, not many. I saw I saw something the other day. I was researching about cryptids, and they were going over percentages of things that people could mistake, like, say, Bigfoot for. And they had, like, say, for instance, 300 um, sightings of Bigfoot in Ohio. And then when they looked at possible other things, they were comparing the percentages to, like, black bear. And in Ohio, there's only, like, at the most, from this thing they got the numbers from, said there was less than 100 in Ohio. So it definitely was something which would make, looking at Ohio as a very big state. You have less than 100 bears in the state of Ohio. They're interspersed throughout the state, top to bottom, left to right. You're not going to get big groups in one place. You only have a couple here and there. And there were that many sightings. So apparently they're seeing something. Um, this thing reminded us of a polar bear, not a grizz. Like you see, like a grizzly bear or a big brown bear, which they're the same thing basically. They get huge, but they're more or less like a walking boulder. This thing looked like a polar bear on growth hormone and steroids. It was so massive, like I said, it looked fake. It was shaped, though, again, like a polar bear, where if you look at a polar bear like on a video or pictures, the difference between a polar bear and, say, again, like a Kodiak grizzly bear, their limbs are longer, they're thinner and more lean, they're longer. That is how this thing was shaped. And it was huge. And when it stood up, it was so much bigger. And when it stood up on its legs, it had legs like a dog in the shape. But that's the only comparison. It had no other comparison to a regular dog because the muscles in its legs were gigantic. On the quads, you could even see the separation. Quads have two muscles there. You have, like, that crease that goes down, diagonally through the middle and the side. You could see that, and the muscles were just rippling and huge. Even the lower muscles, by the feet. And then you could see, like, at the very bottom where the feet were, where there was just more or less the bone, you could see through the skin. Even the bone was just so thick, and it was freaking us out. And, its upper body was the only thing I can say that was man-like. It had a humongous body build, but not even a bodybuilder, because it was so much bigger than a bodybuilder. The only thing I can say is just the way that the muscles were you know built up, the shape of them and how ripped they were. That's the only comparison I could say. But the size, again, was just a huge man bodybuilder would look like a child next to this thing. And it was just so massive, and in its hands. And I didn't get, like I said, a great look at the hands. What I did see, they reminded me of real long finger and thumb, like raccoon, but giant raccoon hands. I never got a chance to see how big those nails were, but we heard them. And its chest and its arms were just muscle covered and huge, and it was a V shape. It had a thin waist, but you could just see muscles in its abs and on its sides. Its lats were gigantic. Around its neck was huge, and its biceps, everything was huge. And what freaked me out again was just how long the arms were, and they went past the knee. I mean, they were almost to the ankle, it looked like. And when it was down on all fours, I forgot to mention this. And when it was walking in the room, if you've ever seen a big cat, like a tiger or a cougar or a panther, when they walk, they get their shoulder blades in their shoulders. They come popping up out of the back with each step that they take. They come up in the air, and they're real noticeable. Well, this thing had those, the way that it was cat like that. And the big difference though was its scapulas were just, when they'd pop up, they were covered in muscle. You see muscle rippling under the skin, and just the shoulder blades were covered with just huge, massive, thick muscles. And when it stood up, I was talking earlier about those pillars in the room. It stood up in front of one of those pillars. And after this experience had happened, and I'm not finished telling it, but after it had happened years later, we went back. And when we looked at these pillars, we did some measuring and whatnot, as best as we could. And we had figured out they were roughly 4 or 5 feet wide. And from floor to ceiling, these foundation pillars were anywhere from 14 to 20 feet high. So when this thing stood up, it was every bit 9 to 10 feet tall, and it was just gigantic. It might have been a little taller than 10. I don't know. I wish we had a better, way to have measured it, but minimum 9, 10 feet tall. And it growled at us again. And this time, nothing really happened. And I believe, and my buddies believe, and I've told some other people recently, and everyone kind of seems to believe that half wall of concrete that was in front of us, we still felt the growl in our chest. You could hear it. You heard it in your head, and it almost vibrated you when it growled. But none of us got that sick feeling again. And I really believe that wall that was there, that half wall, helped block some of that infrasound that it was using, because that's what it was using. That's what, a lot of big cats and big predators in the world use infrasound to discombobulate their prey, and it works. And if anybody is doing some Bigfoot studying or watching TV, you hear about infrasound and Bigfoot's using it. Well, these creatures use it too. And my buddy, who had fell into the wall, and I had to quiet, and he just completely loses it. And he's checked out 100%. He starts screaming and crying, and he goes to run outside. Now, there are 4 floors, like I told you. Then outside, on the outside of the building, are fire escapes. The fire escape goes from the fourth floor all the way down. But when you go outside, and we learned on another day when we were just doing adventuring around, the fire escape from the second floor down to the first and to the ground level had at some point over the years rusted away, broken, and fell to the ground in a big crumpled pile of steel. So if you went out onto this fire escape, you could not go down unless you jumped, and you would have died. You could go outside and go up to the 4th floor from where we were on the 3rd, or you could take the stairs and go up to on the inside of the building and do the same. The only problem is you were stuck. You had no way off the roof, and it took you to the 4th floor roof, so above where the stairs inside would take you. So you had no way of getting out. The only way of getting out was going down the flight of stairs and getting past this creature. And for all intents and purposes, I mean, I'm just going to say it, where we were back in late 89, 90, early 90, all that we knew at that point in those days was this thing looked like a werewolf. Now they're called Dogmen, and that's what I refer to it as, a Dogman. But back then, all we knew was what we saw on TV or in movies, and that's exactly what we all thought that we were looking at, and what was chasing us was, for all intents and purposes, again, a werewolf. And it was. And it was a dog man. Looking now for all of the research I've been doing and what I've learned, 100%. And this thing starts looking around the room, and it looks and it sees the stairs. And I was watching it do this. We all were. And as soon as it saw the stairs, it dropped down onto all fours again, very fluidly too. Real quick, I just want to say this: whenever this thing moved, and it went from 2 feet to 4 feet, or reverse that, and from 4 to 2, it moved like a puma or a black panther. And when you watch them run, or you watch them jump out of a tree or up into a tree, they move very fluid, like just like they're made of liquid metal or oil or something. It moved incredibly beautiful. I mean, I have to be honest, it just was crazy how it moved so smooth, and how it transitioned back to, uh, 2 or 4 feet. And I watched this one show on Discovery Plus. It's called Haunted Woods or something along those lines, or These Woods Are Haunted. Um, and there was a gentleman, an older gentleman, who with his wife had went on a camping trip, and they got stuck in I think it was in Florida somewhere, and they got stuck in a swampy area. And he had hit something with his truck, or something had ran purposely into the trailer that they were hauling. And he stopped it, and he got out, and he had a gun. He was nervous because they were in the swamp and they couldn't see anything. And he goes out, and short story, I'll make it. Um, he sees a dog man, and he sees it down on all fours. And the difference between him and I is, he said when it stood up, he heard all kinds of popping and stuff like that. And he said it didn't look comfortable standing up, and it didn't look comfortable uh, doing it either. And he mentioned the popping a couple times, and that made it sound like it was painful for it. Well, none of that happened with the one creature we were dealing with. It did not make any popping noises. It looked as happy on 2 legs as it did on 4. So it looks at the stairs, and it drops back down to 4, and it runs to the stairs, and we all go, oh, simultaneously, oh, and we use some swear words. And it starts running up from the first floor to the second floor. And it got to that space of 4 stairs missing, and it just hops over it like it's like it's 2 inches wide. It hopped over, and it runs over to the second floor, and it is going to the stairs that will take it from the second floor to the third. And this is when I start thinking, we're going to die. This thing is going to kill us. We're all going to die. It's going to kill each of us one by one. We're going to end up having to watch our friends murdered in front of our eyes. We don't know who's going to go first, but somebody will. And again, there were 4 of us. So I was thinking, we're going to watch this thing kill each one of us, and there's no one that can save us. And I started thinking of my family and some other stuff. I don't remember what. I'm sure I was having that moment that you hear in movies and other people talk in dangerous situations, where their life flashes before their eyes, and it was happening for real. And I started tearing up. And mostly because when this thing started up on the second floor going to the third floor, when it got to the third floor, we would be standing right there. So where we were standing was at the top of the stairs, because the doorway to go outside to the fire escape was right there. And we had all basically started to think, well, we're going to all go out and go up to the fourth floor on the roof, and maybe we can, do something. Two of my buddies are screaming, running in circles, and they start running to that door to go up. I'm stuck. I am in complete and utter just I don't know what to do. My feet are in glue. I'm horrified. I feel like I'm definitely going to meet my maker. My other buddy is just starting to cry and freak out. He keeps hitting my arm. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? I can't answer him because I'm just sitting there thinking about I'll never see my I'm never gonna see my family again. I'm never gonna see my dog again. We're gonna die. And at that moment, I do believe this. I haven't said this before. This will be the first time. I talked to a priest about this after this happened, about a week or two after, because I was having, we didn't know what PTSD was, but I was having it, knowing what it is now. And, I talked to a priest about it because I was so messed up. But this thing starts coming up, and when I talked to the priest, the thing that he and I agreed upon was I truly believe that there was divine intervention. I don't doubt it. I don't think it was luck. I think somebody was looking out for us, be it a dead relative or dead grandparent, their relatives or whoever, one of my buddies' relatives, someone. But what happened at that moment is when it was halfway up those stairs, about to get on us, uh, we start hearing a train on tracks, that metal noise when, you hear the axles like kind of hitting, da-dung, 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 coming our way. And right then we all start getting a look on our face of like, holy blank, we're about to be saved. And this thing notices and kind of stops and glances back at the opening of the room and then looks back at us, starts to walk up the stairs, and it makes its way to the front of the building we're in. I think that they saw the fire because we had a massive one going. And those makeshift walls that we made, they didn't go all the way to the ceiling. We had no way to get that high. So they only went as high as we could stack them. So there was quite a bit of light from that fire going outside. And I believe, and my one other buddy believes that they saw it. My other two buddies thought maybe they were driving by and looked in and saw this thing. I just feel that they saw the fire and they laid on their horn, and it freaked this thing out. Its head snapped back. It looked back at the opening. It saw this train driving by and the noise it was making. And it turned around and ran down both flights back down, hit the ground floor and out the way it came in 1 to 2 seconds. I've never seen anything so fast in my life. It didn't even hesitate. That train freaked it out. And we start immediately screaming, begging somebody, oh God, please, somebody help us, help, help. There's four of us screaming, help. God, please, please help us. Please, Jesus, somebody help us. It's trying to kill us. And we're screaming. And none of us are going down the stairs because we're afraid that if we go down the stairs, this thing is going to walk back in right in our face. And it's making all kinds of noise being so close to the building. The railroad tracks are making noise, and the wheels, and for a second we felt like maybe it was slowing down, but it didn't. And it kept getting farther and farther and farther away. And the farther away it got, the less we could hear it. And we just start looking at each other. It's not stopping. And we can't hear it anymore. It's gone.
we're alone again. And we're like, oh, God in heaven, help us. It's going to come back in. It's going to come back in. Thank God it didn't. But every noise that we heard, we thought it was signaling this creature coming back in the building. Now, remember, there was a giant fire going on. And whenever, something would pop or whatever, we'd think it was this thing. And we were just then remembered that we had weapons on us. Now, if we would have remembered we'd had weapons on us earlier when it was there, first and foremost, none of the guns, including the 38 of my dad's that I had, none of them would have done anything but piss it off. They would have done nothing. I don't think even a headshot. It was so big and so massive. I don't even think a headshot unless I with the 38 hit in its eye with multiple shots. I don't think any of us could have even hit it because we were so scared. Our hands would have been shaking. None of us would have even been able to hit it. And I think if we would have taken those guns out and shot at it, we would be dead right now because it would have got extremely angry. It would have taken us out for sure. So we get the guns out though. We get out our weak flashlights that we had. And when I was that age, there was a store that's not around called Farmore, and we had our Farmore. I always joke around this. We had our Farmore special flashlights, the kind that took like 3D batteries and had the old, dim light bulb in it. They barely lit anything, but there were four of us, and together we got a little bit of light when we got outside. But we were up on the third floor, and it took us maybe 20-25 minutes to get up the courage to go down to the second floor, and we finally did it. And as we're going down the second floor, my one buddy who had checked out and was freaking out was just screaming every step we took, don't go, don't go. And we're just like, he's kind of hanging on to our shirts, and we bring him down to the second floor, and he's freaking out. He's lost it 100%. And we can't even shush him anymore. He's just lost it. And I'm close to losing it too. And so are my other two buddies. And we were up on the second floor for maybe 15-20 minutes, and then we make it down to the first floor. And then the fear sets in again, like fully. Like, okay, man, I mean, this thing could be standing outside. It could be back by that mound of material waiting for us. Another scary thought was, when you'd hop up to come into this building where the stairs used to be, if you looked underneath this concrete kind of half patio that we would have to jump up onto, you could look under it, and there was like space under it that went back pretty far. So, all four of us could go under there and hide under there. So one creature, even at that size, could have did it. So we're thinking, what if it's there? As soon as we hop down, it's going to grab us or attack us. So we're like, we got to go. It's getting late. By the time after all this happened, it was probably about 10:30. And we're like, we have to get out of here. So we start to leave. And my one buddy who had checked out starts going postal. You can't leave me. We have to stay. It's going to kill us all. We got to stay here. And he's just screaming, freaking, saying everything. We can't go. We can't go. I tell him we've got to go. We have to leave. We have to get out because it is going to come back. This is obviously its territory. It's going to come back and it's going to kill us. We got to go. And he's screaming, crying, no, 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 we can't go. Finally, I grab him, and I grab him by the face too, and I yell at him, and I wasn't nice. And I don't feel bad even all these years later because we got him to leave. I looked at him and I said, listen, You have got to at least pull yourself together enough to walk out of this building, because I'm telling you right now, this thing is going to come, and it's going to come back, and it's going to kill us. And we are leaving. So you can decide to stay yourself and let it kill you, or man up, get some cojones on you, enough for us to leave, and we get out of here. Otherwise, you can blankety blank stay here and die, because you will die if you're here by yourself. No, please don't leave me, please. And we turn around and we just start walking away. And at first he couldn't move. He was just, no, don't, screaming, don't leave me, don't leave me. And then we say, come now or you're by yourself. And he begrudgingly runs and grabs both me and my buddy's shirts, and is holding on to our shirts as tight. It was almost choking us. And we go out of the building, and we don't hear it or see it. And I have to say this too, getting down there, my one buddy actually lived across the street, right across the street from these steel mills. And outside his door, there was a street, then there was a fence, and then there was a 4-lane kind of highway called Route 422, or Youngstown Road, if you look that up. And it right after you would cross that freeway was the opening to this area that you could go in, and you could get into the steel mills. So it would take us roughly about a half an hour to get down there. So we knew it would be about a half an hour for us to get back. And that was a complete nightmare all by itself, was because just hearing any noise, any piece of gravel that one of us would accidentally kick walking back, any noise. We heard that pack of dogs again at one point. They were far. We got super scared and thought that was signaling that this thing was back. We never saw the dogs again. And we just, we're hoofing it, trying to get back. Once we get to a certain point, was like the last point that we could get out of there from, was this gigantic pile of like gravel and dirt and all this. And I mean, it was huge. And, going in and going down was easy. You could go down on 2 feet, kind of, turn your feet and go down all the way to the bottom. But getting back up, you had to go down on all fours yourself, and you had to climb up. And every once in a while, each one of us, all 4 of us, that would always happen to, you'd start to slide back down, and you have to start over again and get back up. Well, when this would happen to us, every time one of us would start to slide back down, we'd start to scream, and we'd think, you'd ask our buddies who were up higher, is it behind me? Is it behind me? Let me tell you something. That was one of the most terrifying parts right there. Sliding back down, thinking this thing was behind you. And once you stopped sliding down, it was going to pounce. And, it took us a while to get up. Once we got up, we were so exhausted. We were breathing so hard and sweating, pouring sweat, because it was June and it was hot. And we finally got up, and then we crossed the streets, and I mean, we could barely walk. Our legs were shaking. We were so exhausted. I remember we made it back to my buddy's house, and he had a hose outside, and we all took turns with it. We just drank and drank and drank and drank, and then we just sat there. And no one was at his house. His mom and dad and sister were somewhere else, and we just sat there on the porch for maybe an hour, and we just stared at the mills. I kept staring at the mills, wondering if we were going to see it. We did not. And after like an hour and a half, we started looking at each other and talking. And the only one who didn't talk was my one buddy I told you that had checked out. He didn't talk for 2-3 days. he actually had to go see a psychiatrist and get some help. And he was really messed up, and we all were, but he was bad. And we made a pact that night that if we, when we decided to tell our parents, that we wanted to make sure that we were never alone, that all four of us were going to be with each other at each one of us his house, and tell our each respected parents. And we did that. Um, my dad thought we saw a bear. My mom didn't believe us. She's like, "Oh, you guys are crazy. You didn't see a werewolf, or you guys are watching too many movies." And my other two buddies' parents did not believe us, but the only parent who gave us any inkling of believing us was my best friend's dad, who I told you held a high position in the city. His mom was just like, I don't know. I don't know if you guys saw what you think you saw. And she just said his name, her husband's name, and said, "You deal with it." And she left the room. And we told him everything about what happened, and he went off on us. He went off on us, number one, because he wanted to know why we would think that it would be okay for us to be down in those dilapidated, closed up steel mills. And he said stuff that we already knew. Do you realize that people hide their drugs down there, or gangs, kill people down there? The mob has hidden bodies, everything I said before. He said the same stuff. And he said, if you guys ever go down there again, I'll have you arrested. And he meant it. And he did not flat out tell us he believed us, but he gave us the impression he knew what we were talking about, and that he didn't doubt us. And he even said at one point, you guys went down there and that thing was running around and blah, 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 blah. And that was it. And, my best friend told me a week later he had talked multiple times with his dad alone. And he said, don't ever say this around my dad. He says, but, he said he knew what it was. He'd heard stories about it. He said he told my best friend that he didn't say it straight out, but gave my best friend the impression that whatever this thing was killed the homeless person that they had got a report. There were two of them that were killed by wild dogs. He had only mentioned the one that had happened that summer, and he gave us the impression that that's what got him, and that some of the police officers in Youngstown had seen these things or seen it, and that they were aware of it, and that they have had sightings of it before, which gave us credence. And he actually, I found out years later, my dad talked to him about it. He told my dad, and my dad later apologized to me and said, "I believe you," years later. And it was a crazy experience. And there was even a touch of supernatural possibly that happened when the thing was walking into the building by the fire. I don't know 100% if this is what happened, but its front left paw, when it was walking by the fire, I don't know if it was just reflection on its fur, if its fur was wet or what, but you could see when its paw hit the ground. First and foremost, what happened was it was real close to the fire. You got like wisps of fire that looked like real miniature little tornado cyclone kind of action that came up off of the sides of its paws. And the way I liken it to is, if you ever see video of the sun and you see how they have like those magnetic storms on the sun, and you get those twirling effects or anything on there. They make cyclone shapes and whatnot. Except this was like miniature, miniature, miniature. It made a real quick like that look, and then I'm telling you, it almost seemed like the paw almost past the bend in the ankle up to mid shin. Looked like for a second all you saw was the fire behind it, almost like it was either cloaking or invisible or whatever. But all I saw was the fire through it, and then split second later it was just normal. It happened super fast, and I talked to Josh Turner about it on Paranormal Roundtable, and he had an experience with one and a dog man, and he had something similar happen. So he had said, "Hey, that happened to me," kind of. So I don't know exactly what happened there. It was very fast, but very noticeable. But it was an insane night, and it really happened. And we talked about it for years and years and years. And two of my buddies, like I said, unfortunately passed away. My other buddy, who's still with us, he doesn't like to talk about it because he's got a big job with a big company, and he doesn't want to have somebody here that he talked about it and lose his job, which is a real danger that can happen. It has happened. We've talked about that, and Dixie Cryptid, Cameron Buckner talked about on his show recently that he doesn't like giving names out, with last names, because he had some listeners lose their jobs, and you had mentioned something similar happened, and Miguel, and it's we talk about it though with each other to this day. I will remember it till the day I die. I know what happened. Our stories never changed over the years. We all remember the exact same things year after year. We said the same things, and it really happened. And it's crazy that these things are out there, but they are. And that's my story.
All right, Matt, I really appreciate you for sharing your encounter with me, and it really touched my heart and scared me to death. Listening to each word just had me listening so hard, and I was paying close attention. Yeah, I have a few questions for you that I've typed up if you're ready to answer some questions. You answered most of them throughout your story as you were retelling your encounter.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, let's see what we can find here. Like I said, you answered most of them. Let's go back to the last thing you said. When the creature was walking by the fire, do you think it possibly could have been the deep breaths it was taking that caused the fire to have that vortex or tornado effect to it?
It was when its paw hit the ground is when that kind of little vortexes popped off on each side of its paw. But it wasn't just like, like ashes and some smoke, or it was it was actually flame. And it came up, and it was right next to its leg. And it almost seemed like when the leg itself, the paw and its leg itself, or hand or whatever it had, hit that ground and it got near that fire, it's almost like the fire kind of was pulled near its leg, and those things, those little cyclones just shot up around it. It wasn't looking down when it happened. It was looking around the room. In fact, when that occurred, from my memory, what I'm seeing in my head is its head was up and looking to the right. So it wasn't even breathing down where that could have affected it in any way, shape, or form. There was something going on, and I truly believe that it was something along the lines of cloaking or turning itself invisible for a split second, and or it was just phasing in and out. If this thing's not 100% natural, which I think, it possibly maybe supernatural. I lean more towards supernatural myself. I just don't know if it was kind of like, I always say this, some of these creatures ride the veil. They ride that veil that keeps them either in their parallel world, or they can cross that veil or that line and come into ours. Well, it was almost like it was walking in between both, with that leg kind of, went in and out of wherever it's from. And that's kind of the impression I got from it.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And can you describe the features on the creature the best you can as far as its face? I think you described everything else as far as it being jet black and how it could go on all fours and stand up. But yeah, could you describe the face? What do the eyes look like? How long was the snout and the ears?
Yeah, you know what? I had talked to somebody else about its look, and I thought about, movies I've seen over the years and pictures I've seen on the internet, and things like that. And the one thing over the years that I have seen, so I found some that have looked similar, but I actually saw a movie, Van Helsing, with Hugh Jackman. And I don't know if you've seen that movie, but in that movie, he turns into a black werewolf. And when I saw that movie in the movie theater, my heart stopped, because when he turned into this thing and he kind of looks at the screen at one point, or he's looking at Dracula, that is the closest thing I have ever seen. Now his legs in the movie were I think more human like, so its legs weren't like, but its facial features and everything reminded me of that. It had a long snout. What I'll always remember too is, on its neck, it had a real thick, short neck, but coming off like the bottom of its cheeks onto its neck, there was like tufts of hair on both sides. And it came off of its neck and the bottom of its cheek together, and it was shaped kind of like in a spaded shape. And it went out maybe, I don't know, 5, 6 inches off of its neck, and that always kind of stuck out to me. Its eyes, I remember, aside from the glowing, um, its eyes were just huge. It went along with the mass of this creature, of just how huge and massive it was. It was so gigantic, and its eyes were just so large as well. And the way I knew how big this thing was the separation between each eyeball. They weren't close together. I mean, there was like maybe 3, 4 inches separation between its eyes. So that gave you more of an idea of how big it was, because they were far apart and they were huge. They looked like, maybe if I had to pick something to put on its eyes to compare the size, they looked like maybe the size of $50 coins. They were just humongous, and that's why we were all able to see the pupils and each inner circle of this dog man's eyes when it looked around. It was just, they were giant, and at no time did it ever not have that color, that amber yellow orangish kind of color in its eyes. It never stopped doing that. At some points, it was much brighter than it was at others, but at no time did they like stop glowing, and then it was like, oh, well, its eyes are black or dark brown. It just never stopped doing that. So that's the only color we saw. The muzzle and the nose, and it was long. It was not short like a bear. It was very long, and thick, like maybe a timber wolf, have very long and broad features on their muzzle and their mouth. And like I said, when it licked that saliva that was pouring out of its mouth, You could see sometimes the teeth and they glinted in the firelight. But what I had forgotten to mention was when it looked up at us from the first floor up and looking at us on the third, and it growled at us, it bared all of its teeth. And because we were so close, we were, even though we were on the third floor looking down, we were maybe, again, 15 to 20 feet at the most. I'd say 15 or 12 feet, distance from this thing. So we were super, super close. And when it growled at us that second time, we got a full view of all of its teeth, and it had a gigantic just set of choppers, and its canines were humongous. They were just hanging real low, and the bottom canines were going up real far as well. So those four, when it closed its mouth, it looked like the tips of them were hanging out its mouth. And all of the other teeth were huge as well. Again, just this sense of it's fake, of almost like I have to be sleeping. I just keep getting that thought is, well, I'm sleeping. This can't be real. This thing's not real. I'm going to wake up any second. I must be having, just a flashback of, American Werewolf in London or whatever, because that's how I said to my one buddy, it looks like American Werewolf in London. We're looking at a werewolf, which it didn't really look like it. It's just that's the movie we knew, and that's what I referred to. But all the years later, seeing all the movies and all the pictures, and I researched it. I am a cryptid nut now. It's all I watch. It's all I research. I am infatuated with it, and I have been ever since I was a kid, and that happened to me. And it was just crazy. Talking about real quick about some of the other features, the ears, like I had mentioned before, they were very long and wide, but they were very streamlined and pointed. They reminded me of a German Shepherd and wolf kind of mix. When they were up at attention, they were almost like you see a radar station going left to right, the cup going left to right. They would move in that fashion. Once in a while, you'd see the right one move and turn maybe to the right, and the left one turn the opposite way, or then they'd be in sync with each other, and they would move and look around. And like when it saw us up on the third floor, even its ears, when it saw us, even its ears snapped to and went and looked like his ears were pointing at us. And they were very high off of the head, and they were wide, and they seemed like at times they would widen more, and the ears would not be so high, and then it would get more alert, and they'd close up and they'd get longer, if you understand what I'm saying. And then again, the features, like on its chest, I had mentioned, it was the only thing, in my opinion, that was man-like. But again, it's hard to say that because the size was, again, just so ridiculous. Like even now, like the hairs on my body are standing up. I like have that anxiety butterfly feeling in my chest right now thinking about it. It was just so massive though, and the muscles on it was, again, it was like it was fake. I felt like I was looking at a cartoon, or like and I've always and still am. I'm a big comic geek. I don't collect them anymore. I have a huge collection, but I grew up, Marvel, DC, Image Comics freak. And I love all the movies, but it's like I felt like I was looking at a comic book, the way that artists draw superheroes. They just have like they were chiseled out of stone, and that's how this thing looked. It had muscles on top of muscles. It had like a 12 pack. It didn't have a 6 pack.
It had like a 12 or 16 pack of muscles. It just kept going down its stomach all the way down to, and I did see the outline and shadow of which let us know it was a male. I didn't get a perfect view of its privates. Like when it urinated outside, I caught a little like back, shadow of it. But when it was in the light, you saw it a little bit better. It was very large. Um, but its stomach and its pecs were huge. They would like move as well. Kind of how you get bodybuilders or guys with big pecs will kind of like make them each move independently. It wasn't standing there making him doing that. I don't want anybody to think I'm saying that, but they just would move once in a while, like as it would like step or whatever. It just seemed like every muscle in its body, each muscle moved every step it took. It had huge arms, huge shoulders. Its traps were huge. In fact, like its neck, and it's almost like its head was part of the neck and traps, not like they were separate. It was just so wide, and it was just like one big muscle. And you could just barely point out the different muscles that made that area up. And its shoulders were gigantic. Underneath, like, the lats, like on underneath, like on its back was super wide. And that's how wide I knew it was. I say it, and we all said it had to be every bit minimum 4 feet wide, because when we went back years later, that we got the guts to go back was years later, and we looked at these pillars. When it stood in front of this one pillar, you didn't see like the sides of the pillar, like on the sides of this Dogman. You didn't see like the pillar on its sides. It covered the pillar up completely, and so it was every bit 4.5 feet, maybe even 5 feet wide. And like I said, it had to be minimum 9 to 12 feet high. I think it was more along the lines of 10 and a half feet. It was just, again, so gigantic and so huge. It's like I was watching a movie. It's like I was reading a comic book. It's just, I still, even now, I'm stuttering. Like, I just can't believe, looking back in my mind's eye, what we saw and what happened. But it did. And again, what I loved about the situation was not only that there was, that I found out there's a whole nother world out there, that there are things that go bump in the night, and it's not just your imagination. There are things out there that we have no idea, and that people that will hear this video and they'll scoff, and they'll say, "Ah, yeah, right," like they do to every other Bigfoot, Dogman, whatever, lizard man story. But they can do that because I know what I saw, and all four of us knew what we saw. And that's something that helped. But it's just, it really piqued my interest as well. It didn't scare me off. It made me more interested in the paranormal and cryptid world, to realize that it's not fake, that there is a world out there, or a world right next to us, parallel, that these things, because you always hear these stories, like for instance on Skinwalker Ranch, you hear about portals opening, and you hear about sometimes dogmen or other creatures, shadow creatures or something else, crawling out of these portals. I heard a story about this one woman on one of the other shows. I think it was Sasquatch Chronicles with Wes, about a woman saying that these things are coming from in our earth, and they're coming into our world. They're coming out from there. And maybe that is where they're coming from. I have a true belief. Everyone wonders where Sasquatch and his like hide? Where do they go? Where do they put the bodies? Where I think that they're in cave systems and in earth and stuff, and that's where these things go. And that could be where Dogman goes. There's been stories where, like the LBL story of I forget Martin's last name, but he told the story as an ex-cop with another ex-cop that they went hunting in land between the lakes and were attacked by Dogmen, and when they were leaving to get away, they saw in the distance two Bigfoot that looked angry, and they had heard these metal noises that on another missing 411, this one gentleman disappeared, and one of his hunting partners said he heard this metal noise that sounded like a car door scraping on concrete in the middle of the forest where that would never be possible. And he got the impression, Martin did on LBL, that maybe that some Bigfoot are in charge of some dogmen and that they're kind of like their hunting dogs. There's some kind of connection there, and it is supernatural. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I apologize. Was there any other physical features that I haven't mentioned? Or
I was getting ready to ask, what do you think they are? And you just described it, and I agree. I mean, there could be an underworld or a cave system where these things come out of, but I also agree that it's supernatural, and there's definitely more to it than just a natural creature on this earth that hasn't been discovered. It's either connected to aliens, which I believe personally aliens are demonic, and yeah, I think it's all biblical stuff. That's my personal opinion. That's just how I feel about it. That doesn't mean that's actually what's happening, but that's the way I've perceived the world through the data I came across.
Well, there has been lately quite a bit of talk about connections of aliens maybe being demonic, and them, they not coming from other planets in the universe, but actually coming from parallel worlds or from other worlds, meaning like maybe hell or whatnot. So I have heard stories talking about that as well, and I honestly could believe that some of them do come from some of those places, and that some of them are demonic because of what they do and characteristics that they have. I think just like there's different people, and just like there's all these stories about there's different Bigfoot out there, and some are like this and some are like that and some look different, and I feel that the same goes for Dogman and for aliens. And I've seen things where there are just that we know of on our planet, supposedly 12 to 14 different species. And who's to say that, some of those species are not demonic? And I'm right with you. I think there is just so much going on that we don't have an idea of. And what's crazy, Miguel, is, it seems like lately, over the last few years, that more and more supernatural things are happening, and more cryptids are coming out of the woodwork, and doubters are not doubters anymore, and they're seeing things more than ever. And it's starting to make me wonder, like, what's going on, that all of this stuff is being seen these days, and the more things are coming out and more people are agreeing that something's going on. It makes me a little nervous. Like, are we seeing more and more these days because something's about to happen? So I don't know, but I'm right with you, bud. And I hear some people out there, real quick, I'll say this. Some people out there saying, oh, Sasquatch is just natural. And no, you hear so many stories of these balls of light around Sasquatch, or even instances of Sasquatch being seen carrying balls of light, or a Sasquatch being seen, and then there being a UFO or a UAV, and or vice versa, that there's a sighting of a ship or something, and then not long after that, there's these balls of light, and or a Bigfoot is seen. Or I don't think that's natural if that's going on. And I think that they are so much smarter than some people give them for. I think they are incredibly intelligent. And I want to say this: I 100% believe, and I've thought this for years, people putting cameras out in the woods, the trail cams and all this. And everyone say, "Oh, look at all the trail cams out there. They're not getting any pictures." I'm telling you right now, I 150% believe that these cryptids, specifically Bigfoot and Dogman, can see in the spectrum of infrared, and they see these trail cams. That's why they're destroying them. That's why you see them getting messed with, and it almost seems like a hairy arm or something coming up from behind it to knock it off, or break it, or you never get a good picture because they can see them. And I truly believe they see that in that spectrum, and they're going to have to do something else, and use a different spectrum on these cameras, because they can see them and they can see the light.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I love your channel. I've been, ever since I came up on it, I've been listening and watching, and that's why I wanted to contact you and come on. And it's been an honor, man. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. And it was a pleasure having you on the show, and it really helps out Sasquatch theory. So thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. I will be listening on, and I will push people your way, Miguel.
I appreciate that. And if you ever come across anything else in your life, feel free to reach out.
I will. I will.
All right. Well, you have an excellent day, and it was very nice speaking to you, sir.
Same here. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye. All right, Matt, I really appreciate you for sharing your encounter, and I am really sorry this happened to you and your friends. I can't imagine how many years this has weighed on you, and I really appreciate you for having the courage to tell us all the full story. If you have a cryptid encounter that you would like to share on the channel, please contact me at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. Also, if you enjoy listening to Sasquatch Theory, please be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you everyone for listening, and I appreciate you guys for following the channel. Thank you, and be safe.